You're listening to Technomics, connecting you to insights on digital transformation and the marketplace. The host's opinions are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to Technomics, Insights podcast that connects you with industry leaders as they discuss digital transformation, the modern workplace, and future trends. Today we have a unique opportunity to hear some highlights from our Network Innovation Livestream held in April of 2017. You will hear some fascinating conversation amongst our panelists regarding simplification, automation, and security. So, without further ado, let's tune in as the livestream moderator, Kurt Cornum, Insights Vice President and Chief Solution Architect, introduces our panelists.
Hi, I'm Kurt Cornum with Insight Enterprises, and I'd like to welcome you to Insight's 5th live stream event hosted by our friends at Cisco Systems. So I'm going to set the stage for today. Today's topic is around network innovation, and we could probably spend the entire live stream today talking about why we need network innovation. But I suspect if you're watching today that you probably already understand why we need network innovation. So with our panelists today, we're going to focus more on some of the aspects of how do we do networking as we move forward. How do we make it simpler? How do we add more automation? And then also, how do we add advanced security features to the networks as we move forward? So I'm going to introduce the panelists, and they're going to guide the rest of the conversation today. So I'm going to start with Tanya. You're up first since you're closest. And Tanya brings over 25 years of industry experience with expertise in networking, system integration, and consulting. And that's a short list because I know you've done a lot more than that. And is the Director of Intelligent Network Practice for Insight. She leads a team of specialists that really help businesses look at how they drive innovation across their organizations and really differentiate themselves in the market. So I appreciate you being here today,
Thank
Tanya.
you, happy to be here.
And Mario Castro next to Tanya. Mario, welcome. And Mario is the Director of Operations for the U.S. commercial business for Cisco Systems. And as a sales leader for that organization, Mario is responsible for over $2.7 billion worth of sales across the products and services, and that's a global responsibility that Mario has. He's been doing this for over 30 years, I know in sales and on the technical side of things as well, and he helps business solve some of the toughest challenges really across a wide variety of industries, whether it's healthcare or manufacturing or education. And so we appreciate your perspective today.
Looking forward to it.
As well. And then next to Mario, we have Rob Parsons when he's not out racing his truck. I know you probably, your passion is around networking because I know you pretty well. And he's a member of Insight's technical leadership team, and Rob plays a key role in helping us define our offerings. And then he's also out there creating custom solutions for our clients and really getting into the reality of what's happening in our clients' networks today and showing them how they can really put that technology to work in a secure way and make it agile and more innovative and things like that. So I appreciate you being here as well, Rob.
Thanks, Kurt.
And last but not least is Scott Shoemaker, who was actually my roommate for 6 months about 12 years ago on a networking project. He probably hates that I mentioned that, but I thought we got along pretty well.
Yeah, that's great.
So, got thrown together for 6 months, and it was actually a great project, and I learned a lot from Scott. I consider him a mentor in a lot of ways. So Scott has more than 30 years of industry experience, and he brings a wide range of expertise, providing really a kind of strategic view of kind of that full stack around IoT, and, as well as design and implementation. And he's worked with enterprises, I know, of all sizes and complexity, and he just has a real passion for how do you help, bring technology to work and help it improve IT and the business functions as well. So I feel great to have you guys here today, and without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and launch into some questions, and we'll let you guys respond to them, and keep it interactive and candid, and we'll see where this goes. So Tanya, one of my favorite quotes was Leonardo da Vinci, because I like these big thinkers because they keep me humble, I guess. And he talked about that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And so talk to me a little bit about, I mentioned the simplification, and what's that really mean in terms of, how we deploy things, how we implement things, what's the impact that's having on the enterprise today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in the realm of network deployment and management, real productivity gains can be realized when we reduce the number of people who are involved in those processes. And through systems integration and tools that we have available to us today, fewer touch points are required. And those productivity gains translate to the business in terms of reduced OpEx costs. Now, I really like a quote by actually one of the executives at Pizza Hut, because I love pizza, who recently said, when it comes to simplicity, sometimes it takes a whole lot of technology to make things simple. And I think when we as IT professionals are deploying our new solutions, that simplicity is a key characteristic that we need to be striving for, because the customers and our workforce expect it. They require it. And sometimes that simplicity translates into cost savings, as I described earlier, but sometimes it also translates into revenue growth. So sticking with the pizza theme, in 2016, Domino's actually increased their market share by 15%, largely due to an application that they launched enabling their customers to be able to order pizzas via text message and even emojis on any mobile enabled platform, and be able to track the status of their order as the pizza was being prepared. So I think whether we're talking about end user applications or we're talking about workforce enablement and automation types of tools, I think simplicity is key.
Got it. So Scott, beyond the pizza analogy, what are some other areas where you're seeing simplification show up, either in kind of the IT operations and some of those areas that you're involved in?
Yeah, I really like that that quote, because it does illustrate an important point that Tanya was making, that simplicity is not about making networks, very simple. It's not, as one of our colleagues likes to say, it's not just two cans in a string. Networks are as sophisticated or more sophisticated than they've ever been. But operationally, what enables that simplicity that she was talking about is the technology, and it's the software-defined networking technology. That very simple concept that says separate the control plane from the data plane. When they first started talking about software-defined networking and we first heard that, I think everyone was scratching their head. What does that really mean? But what we're seeing happen, of course, as that is playing out, is that control plane, the data plane is letting the switches and routers and firewalls do the things they do, switching packets. But the control plane is all about the configuration, the management of the device, and when you separate that out in terms of the software, now you can bring that function to a centralized point. So you have something that typically they call a controller that is now controlling all those network devices. And so the simplicity comes from that centralized point, the fact that you don't have to go and touch every device. In terms of the configuration, oftentimes the syntax of doing the configuration or the moves, adds, and changes is abstracted somewhat by that centralized controller. And so that's where we're seeing the simplicity actually become a reality.
I mean, I've seen more acronyms out there that start with SD something. Right. It's like, it's like SD anything, SD everything today. And Mari, I know you're on top of that, and you probably, there's a lot of hype in the market around, SD-WAN and SDN. Generally, can you kind of cut through some of the hype and help us understand what's really
software-defined networking has been something that a lot of customers have been pursuing for quite a few years, and there's different pillars, if you will, around areas of focus. But the one that's growing the fastest and the one that's moving the fastest is around SD-WAN, right? Software-defined wide area networking. And there's numerous reasons for that. To the point that Scott made earlier around orchestration and automation, that's one of the key levers that I think customers are really looking to drive, that performance and that capability and that functionality that they're looking for out of those applications that they own and they're responsible for. The second thing around that, which I think is very compelling for customers, is around the transport. When we think about the transport today, it's typically been MPLS or circuits, maybe frame relay if you're still doing something like that. But the transport of tomorrow is really broadband. It's also 4G, LTE type services. And when you think about SD-WAN and the functionality that it brings to the table, many of our customers are actually recognizing an opportunity to introduce new technology to provide all the functionality that Scott mentioned, but at the same time reduce the total cost of ownership, and in some cases maybe even have a payback within 3 to 4 months of that deployment. So in other words, using new technology without ever having to fork into a capital expenditure, right? You use your operational expenditure to go ahead and drive that performance.
Got it. What's some of the areas that you've seen where they've been able to bring simplification to bear, maybe things where you see where they still need to bring simplification to bear?
Sure. So one of my favorite areas to talk about in this space is really guest Wi-Fi. So historically, we've been able to have simple or secure. And we really have the need to have both now. So how do we get there? And we work with a variety of technologies that now allow us to take the user and allow them to path themselves through registering, gaining the proper access, gaining access to the systems that they need through a guest portal. And to Tanya's point, how do we take more steps and more people out of that process to make it simple? And so guest Wi-Fi of today, we're able to identify who the user is, what they need access to, and give them that access in a somewhat automated fashion, and that really simplifies the experience. And in days of the past, we had to call the help desk, ask for an account, get 2 or 3 people involved, tell them what we needed. So really to be able to use a system to take us through that process today is making guests' user experience much simpler than it has been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, with as hyper-connected we are, that just seems like an expectation. I know when we have visitors show up at our office, that's the first thing they ask us is, can I get connected?
Yeah, how do I
to
get on the Wi-Fi,
right? I mean,
yeah.
you're doing presentations today, and there's almost an assumption that you may be pulling data from from the laptop. You're actually pulling it in real time from other places. So I think that's great. And I'm the same way whenever I go to see clients and partners. I want to be connected as well.
I hope you're enjoying this live stream panel discussion. We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, you'll hear Tanya, Scott, Rob, and Mario discuss automation.
Subscribe to Insight's digital magazine, The Script Quarterly, and receive in-depth feature articles decoding today's IT trends. Each issue showcases original content with answers to your technology questions and an in-depth exploration of business technology headlines. Visit insight.com/quarterly to subscribe today.
By now, you've heard about the impact of simplicity in the industry. We will now hear some of the comments discussed regarding automation, another critical piece to network innovation.
So, Mario, I want to come back to you because you mentioned the SD-WAN piece, and it's interesting because if we kind of shift from the simplicity piece, because you guys mentioned automation a few times, can you talk a little bit about, maybe a little deeper around kind of that automation aspect around either that operational piece or maybe the policy-based piece?
Yeah, absolutely. Automation is critical today, probably for all the reasons that you're going to ask us, maybe even we'll talk about, and that is the speed to market, right? Our executive leadership team, our customers are all asking for certain solutions to be up and running in a very quick mode. And without automation, we can't be agile, right? So we absolutely need automation to help us be agile. But we also need to make sure that we're consistent in what we're delivering, and automation helps us do that, right? We make sure that whatever it is that we put in place, we can put in place across the entire organization, and we basically move the needle in every direction that we need to ensure success around that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it also helps us reduce errors, right? When you think about automation and the process behind that, once you've nailed it down, you should be able to go ahead and deploy that without any concern or risk around what it's going to be like when you add the 5th or 6th or 7th device to the environment. It's also important that automation be something that can be supported on-prem or in the cloud, right? And we're seeing a lot of customers really think about the whole process around SD-WAN and how they can potentially consume that, whether it's an on-prem solution or in the cloud solution. And at the end of the day, you're probably thinking to yourself, by the time I do automation, I probably have some resources that I can actually leverage to focus on other things around the business besides technology and focusing on adding or removing devices, or maybe even tweaking those devices for quality of service, class of service, all the other great things that come along. And IoT is driving a lot of that effort. And at the end of the day, we've got to be able to move it at the speed of business, as I mentioned earlier. And that's basically what we're seeing around automation, is how important that is.
I think if we get down to the details, right, and take it down a little bit, the days of network engineers having to touch every device in the process of rolling out an infrastructure enhancement, I think those days are waning. I think now with the tools that we have available to us and the functionality, we're able to do zero-touch deployments. We're able to do things like plug and play. There are even applications and tools available that enable our customers to go in and define network policy and then have that network policy automatically translated into the syntax that the networking devices understand and be able to deploy those configuration changes in a matter of minutes. And actually, Symantec is an excellent example of this. So last year, Symantec adopted Cisco's EasyQoS application that runs on the APIC EM platform, and they were able to modify their quality of service configuration throughout their network infrastructure within a matter of minutes, Prior to leveraging that tool, it took them 6 months to make those types of changes.
Rob, are you seeing folks that are actually that are using that zero, kind of this zero touch? It's almost becoming, where some of the infrastructure, I won't say it's disposable, but folks, they just expect it to be, like Scott was mentioning, you separate the data plane from the control plane and expect the hardware to be able to put in, and it phones home and pulls down a centralized policy, and that's kind of that automation architecture. Do you see folks that are actually, doing that out in the field today? Is it, is it more hype, or tell us about what you're really seeing?
No, it's real today. We see more and more customers doing the one-touch or zero-touch type deployments. Where it really, the rubber meets the road for me is a lot of the cloud technologies. So, like you said, the separation between the hardware and the software, shipping a box on site, it can be plugged in, connected by an office admin or something like that, and hey, it's online, and being able to go from there. It's built on a template, and everything's simple. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is how do we simplify this? But the way we're getting there is through some automation and templating, and really just overall simplification of the deployment activities. Less touches.
Got it. Scott, I know you like to kind of look at the big picture, and when we start talking about some of these automation things, a lot of people start freaking out because they think they're going to lose their jobs and things like that. Mario touched on that a little bit. What's your view of that? What are some other opportunities that you think folks can do, that are probably in that mode of where they're just kind of been used to doing command line type of stuff? I know, Tanya, you mentioned some opportunities. What are you seeing, how are you seeing folks actually, take advantage of that today?
Well, the aspect of that, with all the things that have been discussed, is what hasn't changed is networks still need to be engineered. There still needs to be planning and design, and how are you going to deploy this? And the aspect of that is, when it comes to automation now, that the open APIs are available so that you can customize all of this. It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of solution. The open APIs introduce a whole new aspect of technology into that command line mentality, where now you can do programming. Those programming calls, you have a programming language, and so you can take all of those steps with the command line and other things that typically you had been doing, and write programs to do that. The interesting thing there is when customers are worried about that, say, well, I'm not a programmer, I'm a network engineer, but there is a spectrum of capabilities in the marketplace today that at the highest level, or the highest level of abstraction, is OEM types of tools, where it is tied very closely to particular products. It's more graphical in nature, so it's more intuitive. But then you can get more flexibility, perhaps by using some sort of an open tool. So now you've got a wider range of things you can be applying that to. And then the most flexibility, of course, comes with just writing your own programs to do all of that. Right. And so with that spectrum, depending upon your requirements and your comfort level, there's different ways to customize and take advantage of those automation capabilities.
We'll be back with more of our Network Innovation Livestream in just a minute. Stay with us.
For IT professionals, it's nearly impossible to find and explore all the important business technology headlines, but it's critical to stay informed of the latest IT trends. Get IT news worth sharing and subscribe to Insight's newsletter, The Script. You'll receive weekly industry articles curated from great sources from across the web and stories on intelligent technology to keep you up to date. Visit insight.com/subscribe to sign up today.
The security pillar is critical to this conversation to drive simplification and automation. Let's listen in to further discussion on security.
We talked about the simplicity piece, and then we talked a little bit about the automation and kind of the connection to simplifying at least the operational pieces, although there's more to it than that. But I want to talk about the security piece, because I mentioned a little bit, it came up in the other live streams around, my data's not tucked neatly behind and securely behind my firewalls like it used to be. My users aren't behind my firewall like they used to be. And they're using all these different devices. Oh, and by the way, my customers want to get on my network, and my suppliers, my partners. I mean, everybody wants on, and they want the data, and it's just been far flung. And so the security piece of it really just seems to be critical, that we need to figure that out if we're going to really drive the first two, right? If we're adding complexity to the environment, we need to find these simplification methods to kind of counteract that piece of it. So Mario, I'll kind of start with you. Obviously it's top of mind for a lot of folks. I'm not, I don't really have a specific question except kind of around some of those general innovations that you see, Cisco working on and others in the industry that really kind of give you, some hope that, we're going to level the playing field around, some of the sophisticated hackers that are out there. And how are we going to deal with that?
Absolutely. So, the biggest challenge that we have today is that, and I mentioned earlier about moving at the speed of business, right? We're talking about things like IoT, which many of us are still trying to wonder what those devices are going to be that get inserted into the infrastructure. But at the end of the day, it's coming, and it's coming very quickly. Anywhere ranges of the numbers anywhere between 26 billion to up to 75 billion, depending on what year you're looking at in terms of how that's being measured in particular. But what customers are expecting today is not only to be able to identify when a breach has occurred, but at the same time, how do we remediate it? Right? We struggle still as an organization out there with regards to dealing with security by identifying what comes to the systems information manager that helps us identify where we've had some anomalies, maybe some false positives and the likes of that. And at the end of the day, we can't keep that pace going if we don't figure out a way to take what many customers are suffering with, and that is by the time they figure out they've had a breach, it's probably been close to 100 days, unless it's a ransomware situation, which they are pretty much dealing with immediately, right?
Exactly.
And so if we can move from a 100-day detection to something in the hour ranges or in the minutes ranges, that's really going to be the difference in being able to continue to move at the speed of business and to continue to add these devices that we're talking about, right? And I would argue that at the end of the day, it's got to be the analytics that we're reviewing through machine learning and through other aspects of materials that we would have and solutions that we would have that complement artificial intelligence in such a way that we can start allowing ourselves to be leveraging that kind of technology to help us move at that speed. Because that really is what it's going to take to analyze all that data, whether it's coming from emails, whether it's coming from the web, whether it's coming from antivirus, whatever the element is. As all this data is collected, we have to be able to summarize it and act upon it very quickly.
And it comes through several things. One is visibility. Another is intelligence, as we've been saying. Another is automation, which is different. The intelligence is more of the analytics. The automation is more of the what do you do when you figure it out. And the last area is integration. In the security space, that piece is also really critical. So you take those and put them together, and now you can take all these different point solutions and these different capabilities to detect different sorts of threats, and then how do you react to those? And in order to get the time down, you've got to have the intelligence to analyze it quickly, determine what's going on, and then as soon as you know that, be taking action to either quarantine or block or somehow remediate whatever that threat is. So those are the things that are coming together, and we're seeing that in, of course, lots of different products, sometimes contained in them or a couple things work together. But one thing that I think is really powerful now is with a lot of these capabilities in the cloud, now you're letting your vendor worry about the integration piece and a lot of the other analytics and keeping current on what those threats are. And with the cloud, you don't have to be worrying about all that within your organization and finding staff to be paying attention to that. Your vendor's got plenty of people looking at it and taking care of those things for you.
To Scott's point about the integrated solutions, we talked about this a bit last night. It's really key. I have so many customers today that have multiple security solutions that don't talk to each other today. So if they want to know when somebody came onto the network, they look at one solution. If they want to know what they did while they were there, they look at a different, and they want to figure out how to approach it afterwards, they look at yet a third solution. And they don't all talk to each other, but we're getting to the point where it's possible. We can integrate different solutions through their APIs. Multiple vendors have integrated solutions leveraging the cloud that allow us to put all of that data together. And historically with security, the biggest challenge has been correlation of events, right, and figuring out how that happened, whether it's early on or it's during or it's after. how do we put that all together to execute on a plan to remediate or to stop any sort of security event? And so that integrated solution is really where this needs to go to be effective, in my opinion.
So Tanya, what's your view just kind of generally around what you're seeing and talking to clients about around security? Is it around, is this machine learning real? Are they still struggling with just, with trying to stay afloat? Do you think they're going to need to do things like automation before they can really focus on attacking some of these things? Where do you think they're at today?
So it depends. I think, typical econ professor answer. I think it depends, and it depends on where the customer is actually at, because honestly, it runs the full gamut of people who have invested heavily. I think the typical customer has 40 to 50 different security products in their environment, and they may have at least 5 different OEMs associated with that. So it depends on where they are in the process, but I think that they need to have a good understanding of what they have and of the vision that their business is expecting them to create, to make a reality, and have a plan in place on how to get there. And most customers don't. They're in an environment where they're just doing the best they can to keep their head above water. The CFO isn't offering them, thousands or millions of dollars to go build this secure, agile infrastructure. So they're having to prioritize those investments. And I think that's where having that plan and understanding what the business is expecting of you and how you're going to prioritize your investments is really important.
Got it.
Today, we've heard highlights from the livestream panelists discuss network simplification, automation, and security. If you want to view the entire livestream, visit insight.com. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you for having me as your host, and thank you for tuning in to Technomics.
Thanks for listening to Technomics. If you want to find more episodes, you can download the podcast from iTunes, Google, or your favorite podcast provider. And for more stories on intelligent technology, visit insight.com.